I've never been able to trust somebody to not let me fall before.
Except you.
After everything, all the secrets and lies. I trust you. Now please trust me.
I'm not
Carlos, yo no soy la persona que crees.
really the person that you fell in love with. You're a good man, Simon.
I'm not a good man.
Yes, you are.
Porque te miro a los ojos y siento que no se te a nadie.
He cares about you. Not in spite of who you are, but because of you.
Dan loves me for me. He looks at me and he really sees me.
She's anything but ordinary.
Was that real?
It's complicated.
It's much.
It's real, yeah.
You're saying that your feelings for me.
They're real, Scott. Whatever I thought was there,
Suéltame, por favor.
she thought differently.
This is not the end I dreamed for us. It has to be.
Still I be a traveler,
From Penelope's journey.
a gypsy's reins to face.
He's everywhere.
But the road is weary
God, ghosts
with that full
something in your past you can't live with.
Just let me remember you when it was good. I need more time to get to just friends.
I don't want to be your friend, Blair. I want more. I want you.
I've tried to be her friend.
It sucks you're avoiding me.
I thought you were avoiding me.
I really think I'm sick. I've missed you. Every time you look at me, I'm 17 again. First love, you remember what that's like? And then you look away, and I remember all over again. I never look away.
Well, did you? Love him?
Can't you see?
Jag var född att jag vill älska honom.
Are you still in love with Stefan?
When I was just a
I honestly don't know what I was thinking.
Waiting for you to pick Michael almost killed me. I need you to leave.
no man is.
You get on that plane.
Take one more step, we're done.
Do you hear me? We are over.
We're already over.
My actions
Can't you
destroyed
see?
this. Serena, wait.
Baby,
I'll regret that forever.
you were the ocean.
I'm so
When
sorry.
I was
How did you not
just
accept
a
it?
stone.
Déjame demostrarte que sí tiene sentido apostar por nosotros.
But what you want?
I think I may have loved you before you let go, but I just need to let it go.
I'm not gonna do it.
I just want you to be happy.
Be happy. But happiness is a choice.
You told me that someday I'd be ready to let someone in. I think today might be someday.
No puedo perder a Lidia.
I'm not gonna leave. Until you do.
Apparently I lost you.
Though you didn't want to lose her, Geralt, you will.
Just don't leave me.
Please don't. You're saying goodbye.
I'm not ready to say goodbye.
Goodbye, Kevin.
I guess I'll see you in the next life.
It's better this way, right?
Maybe we'll catch up
Goodbye.
in a better time.